Meghan believed she was as important to the monarchy as Princess Diana, you write in the book. And her visit to Australia in October 2018 only boosted that view. The more Harry drew parallels with his mother, and the more Meghan must have been convinced of her importance to the monarchy. Do you still think she's that delusional? And maybe the answer is watching her at Kevin Costner's 805 Live event in $300,000 worth of jewelry, including Diana's Cartier watch.
Wherever she is, whether it's at Costner or in Colombia or in Nigeria or wherever, she's always, her publicist will reveal that she's wearing one of Diana's pieces of jewelry. I do think that the Australian trip turned their head in a crazy way, although she behaved appallingly during the trip.
Harry's daughter was born at Santa Barbara's Cottage Hospital on the 4th of June, on the same day, but 2 days before the birth was announced. Meghan's lawyers registered the Lilibet.com website after the birth, but before the public announcement. Harry called the Queen. He told his grandmother about the birth and their decision to call their daughter Lilibet. I was so mad about Harry and his grandmother that I never registered that they had purchased a URL before they had the courtesy to tell the Queen about this child's name. I'm appalled by that. It just shows you how commercially driven these people are.
It's much worse even than that, because in Harry's version, he called his grandmother and said they decided to call the daughter Lilibet, and would the Queen approve?
Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Kinsey to get up to 4 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/Kinsey. You name one agent who reveals Meghan has 2 characters, one concealed and one fictional, with a baffling tendency to switch from idolizing to belittling. And then you talk about that initial Vanity Fair piece that was so positive. One of the people that worked with her closely, Sam Kashner, said she demanded that the media do what she expects. I felt manipulated and betrayed. I felt played, orchestrated. And then describing her experience guest editing British Vogue, she worked pretty closely with the actual editor-in-chief, Edward Enninful. And you say over the 7 months, Meghan persuaded herself she was editing the issue, explaining that the editorial team showed silent exasperation with her, that it just feels all artificial.
In any case, the soap sud story, the Ivory Clear, her father's actually emphatic. It was completely untrue. He just built her up as an 11-year-old thinking that she'd been influencing. And when Vanity Fair asked Procter & Gamble whether it was true or not, Procter & Gamble went through all their very carefully, meticulously kept files and found absolutely no letter from Meghan, which isn't surprising because the father said he never sent the letter and there was no reply. So that story is bogus. But I do think there is something which I do think is terrific about Meghan. She, in her podcast with Lima, she says to her, I'm precising the word here, she says, I've always wondered what blood type you've got, because my blood, like everything else, my blood type is overachieving.
Oh my God.
And I think that is her. I mean, she has to build herself up as this overachiever, this very special person.
So Revenge was released in July of 2022. Since then, based on polling and media coverage, how would you describe the trajectory of Harry and Meghan's reputations professionally and personally? It feels like they've taken quite a bit of a dive.
Yeah, I think professionally they've gone down dramatically. And I predicted it in the book, but even I would not have thought it'd be that accelerated. I think personally, they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of in the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Right.
The Netflix series is over. There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. And I don't see where she is going from here. I think she has a major problem. And I think as of this week, the signal for her great problem is that she turned up at Kevin Costner's party for the emergency workers
which she
in
skipped last
California.
year. She skipped that last year. That's a great
He
point
skipped
that
it
she,
last year.
yeah, so many people that reviewed this book talked about how they did get a sense that you admired Meghan's ambition. Do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? That you, in studying her, admired what she was able to accomplish or admired her ambition? And I ask you that because what you just said, um, it kind of felt like that you at least acknowledge that what she's accomplished is significant, but you don't like what she did with once she got to the finish line.
Right, she's not on the finish line yet, but on
Yeah.
the whole, yes, I agree. I mean, yes, I do admire. I admire anybody who starts from nothing and then gets a sort of success. Not just people like Meghan, but also often very controversial and inverted commas criminal businessmen or politicians and all the other people I've read, or the music people.
I think it would infuriate his brother, like you said. In Revenge, you talk about how Meghan's lack of knowledge about British history meant she could not understand that Diana had won the public's affection after years of work. That was a real investment. People felt committed to the journey because they had spent so much time watching Diana really grow up. I think that I think that pairs nicely with what we're talking about with Prince Harry. It's just that lack of understanding. She just thought that, she could burst in and say, look at me, I'm here now. Everybody accept and love me. And she didn't really take time to get to know the process.
I think there was that, but I've got to tell you, my research for my new book, the number of times she was warned before she married what the nature of being Harry's wife and part of the royal family would be, and the nature of how she ignored all that advice for two reasons. One is she really did believe she could do what she wanted, and secondly, I don't believe she ever intended to stay.
I'm curious about your new research. In Revenge, you analyze the discrepancies between their public personas and the Sussexes, their private behavior, suggesting that their claims of victimhood and even charity work were often exaggerated and fabricated. There's been no real improvement to their credibility since you wrote this piece. Have you found other examples of them exaggerating their victimhood or their charity work?
I mean, you've got to understand, which now is clear, that Archwell, their company, is not a charity, it's a commercial organization. They give very little money away for charity because they haven't got much money in the pot. And compared, for example, to Bezos, who gives away hundreds of millions, they give away a few thousand. I mean, it's very small and diminishing. And that is part of their problem. So the victimhood, I think, by now has been pretty played out. I mean, no one is going to listen anymore to them bleating about being racist and being victims of racism.
I think it was over a year ago, I reported that I had heard that Prince Harry was trying to work on a Princess Diana documentary, and now it's being reported by other people. Prince Harry developing a Princess Diana documentary. You just said what I keep saying. He didn't know this woman. Like, I mean, I don't mean to be cruel, but he's off at school. I feel like she's become this martyr saint character in his head. Is he really the authority when it comes, especially when it comes to the death of his mother, where he, and I'm not saying I should make a Diana documentary. I just wonder how accurate a documentary on his mother would be from, by him, surrounded by all of these yes people.
It would be totally inaccurate. I mean, from his own book, where he says for a long time he thought his mother had just disappeared and now believes she'd been murdered by the paparazzi, which is ridiculous. She died because she was in a speeding car with a drunken driver, not wearing a safety belt. But also, he doesn't realize that she wasn't murdered by the media. She played with the media.
You write that Meghan was unable to accept that no one was counting the box office receipts of the crowds she attracted. You can see in recent interviews with Bloomberg, Jamie Kern-Lima, how important validation is to her. It's almost embarrassing the way she tries to sell herself to us. I work so hard. And then she just needs people to admire her. And you're just like, do you ever take a day off?
I think that what she learnt was that people would not admire her for the marriage. That's how she became famous. That people in America tend to like someone who's made it themselves. The climb from obscurity into global fame is what people want to see. So when she sort of suddenly announced that she was a latchkey kid and had to eat takeaway dinners, whereas before she said that she used to eat very healthy food and go to some fine restaurants, which of course is the truth with her father.
You write in the book, Harry must be nuts. This is one of the text messages his friends were sending around to each other after Meghan's first introduction to Harry's friends in 2017 during a shooting weekend at Sandringham. It didn't go very smoothly, you say. You describe her challenging anyone whose conversations clashed with her values and taking issues with jokes about sexism and feminism. I mean, the kind of jokes you'd hear from a bunch of boys that have known each other since they were younger. Harry's friends reportedly felt that she repeatedly reprimanded them and called her a real dampener of the party, to which I would say to you, and this is the woman trying to teach us how to entertain on Netflix, this buzzkill. What else did Prince Harry's friends say? That she just was the fun police?
Well, I mean, this particular saga at Sandringham, which obviously was told by someone who was there, was a decisive moment. I mean, it's the moment where effectively she says to Harry that you've got to dump all your friends.
Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome to Crown and Conflict, a series dedicated to dissecting the most riveting royal scandals in history. This week, I'm joined by Tom Bauer, author of Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors, the defining book on Meghan Markle's very brief history as a working royal. Revenge is a forensic assessment of Meghan's character and her ruthless ambition, cementing Bauer's reputation as one of today's leading investigative biographers. Before we get into it, Tom, ludicrous headlines over the weekend suggesting Prince Harry could somehow worm his way back into the fold. It seems like Sussex PR is in overdrive lately. Are you seeing that too, or do you feel that way?
Well, I do think that Sussex overdrive is unbelievable, but I mean, I don't think that he is going to get back in. I mean, I think that there are two reasons. One is I think that William wouldn't allow it.
Because in your book, Spare, you talk about how Earl Spencer was concerned about how this marriage might be trouble. And you say, at William's request, Earl Spencer weighed in. He went to Prince Harry and said, you should reconsider this, pump the brakes. His advice provoked a bitter reaction, you say. Well, later we find out that Prince Harry, since moving to the United States, approached Earl Spencer to ask permission to legally change his family's name. What was your response to that Harry would want to take the Spencer last name? And does it surprise you that Earl Spencer said, I don't advise it?
Well, the answer is, unfortunately, that was one of the revelations, or many revelations, in my forthcoming book, which I had and heard about this months and months ago. It was actually when they were at Althorpe filming for the Netflix series that he asked Charles Spencer, because for some reason, Meghan didn't like the surname Mountbatten Windsor. What she couldn't understand was the language. She couldn't understand what being royal means. She didn't understand the nature of trust. And that's the thing about Meghan. She's a very, very deceitful person. It's got to be said, in her relationships with her own family is one sign. But the other is that all the inaccuracies which she told Oprah Winfrey, which of course caused huge damage to Britain's reputation around the world and still do, and continued in all her interviews to promote herself. I mean, even in her podcast with Lima, she said, there was the cosmetics woman, she said, it was life with the royal family was battle of the trenches. I mean, the thing about Meghan is, which is very important to understand, I think, that when she set off to create her own brand and image in the whole Netflix series of lifestyle series, she was told she had to give up being the wicked witch in terms of the royal family. She should put that all behind her and not mention them. And that's why People magazine is still so important to her.
Hard eye roll. All right. Meghan was angry that the palace officials refused to protect her image. You go into this, and this is similar to what we're talking about with the media. She refused to accept that staff were not employed to promote her as an individual, but instead placed her within a grid of the entire royal family. In particular, Meghan fumed about the refusal officially to criticize her father, Thomas Markle. From her perspective, Meghan was isolated and vulnerable. Who does she blame now? Now that the palace isn't there, who does she blame for not protecting her? Is it Harry?
No, I think that that's her problem. She always, in the past, had someone to blame. Now the only blame can be on herself, and on people like me who don't accept everything she says with absolute unadulterated praise and glory and gratitude. She doesn't see herself other than always being victimized, because that's Harry.
Yeah.
He won't let out the face.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Catherine. You talk in the book about Kate was filmed laughing with Jill Biden. Meghan, you write, could see the unequal struggle for attention. She will have hated last week's state visit, huh? She would have just seethed.
Absolutely. And it was a wonderful photo opportunity in Cornwall, in the Gardens of Eden there. Quite clearly, Kate was getting on very well with Mrs. Biden, who, of course, was very much Harry and Meghan's chosen friend in the Biden administration. So that would have annoyed them enormously that Mrs. Biden was not as loyal to the Sussexes. And, of course, what happened then was after the Queen's funeral, they did ask Mrs. Biden whether they could return to America with her on Air Force One, and Jill Biden said no, that she wasn't going to insult the royal family. And that, again, is one of those problems that the Sussexes now face, that the A-listers don't want to annoy the British royal family.
They haven't been back since. Why wouldn't you nurture that popularity? It's nothing they do makes sense to me. If they really did think that this Australia trip was the end-all be-all that changed everything, why wouldn't you try to nurture a fan base, because they're celebrities now, in Australia?
Well, I think there are 2 points there. Firstly, the Australian government would have to invite them. And secondly, they won't invite them because the British government and the British royal family would make absolutely sure that no invitation was forthcoming. Because the one thing they don't want is them treading into the Commonwealth. The Nigerian trip was bad enough.
Yeah.
But the British government made sure there were restrictions on what they could do, that I don't think the Australian government would want to invite them. And I think the other side of their travels is they'll only travel where it's free.
Yeah.
And I don't think they'd want to spend the money of going to Australia at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what for what? What are they selling?
Let us know in the comments below. We're going to talk about your next book because you have a new Harry and Meghan book coming out. And don't let me forget when we talk about that, I want to ask you to break down how Harry and Meghan were livid over not being on the balcony during the Platinum Jubilee, because Meghan wanted that shot for Netflix, because that is also one of my favorite parts of your book. But you are a very important man, so you have places to be right now. I'm so grateful for your time today, Tom Bauer. You know you are my favorite author.
I'm going to say that to everybody.
Do you have a date, or is there some...
Well, it'll be out early next year, the new book.
Something to look forward to. I cannot wait, Tom Bauer. Thank you so much for your time today. You are a delight.
Thanks very much for having me.
But sometimes it's just about, shrinking a book down.
You've got to remember, it was a pathfinder, the book. And even the publishers couldn't quite believe some of the things which I discovered. And one of the big things at that time was sensitivity reading. There was a great fear that she would play the race card. And so, for example, there were great arguments about whether you could call her strong-willed or not, because she at the time was playing herself as a black woman, and black women, if they're strong-willed, that's seen to be a stereotype. I think that would now not occur. I think there were various things about her sexual life which I dropped out on the grounds of privacy laws in Britain.
Oh my God, I have got to get you intoxicated, Tom Bauer. I would love to hear those stories.
Yeah. I think I've forgotten them.
Oh no!
But
Then apparently they weren't that good.
They were very good.
Oh
I mean,
no.
I mean, the privacy laws are pretty strong here.
I think that's you mentioned the Disney special. Does the Disney special at all look to you like an influencer pivot? Because that's what I was like, oh my God, oh no. I mean, they're spokespeople.
Absolutely. I mean, the moment they went there and allowed themselves to be photographed, and I thought, well, how much are they being paid for this? And quite clearly, they're being paid to promote it this week too. It'll work in the sense that I think it's Disney today and some sort of butter spread tomorrow. I mean, that's the trajectory they're on, but they're going to have to earn some money.
That's true.
Once hailed as the future of the monarchy, and then as the rebel royals who redefined it, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle now find themselves in a freefall nobody expected, except maybe the man who literally wrote the book on their rise and fall. Tom Bower, veteran investigative journalist and author of Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors, isn't pulling punches anymore. According to Bower, the Sussex brand isn't just losing steam, it's teetering on the edge of collapse. And the most stunning part? They're still pretending everything's fine. From tone-deaf PR stunts at Disney World to Meghan's desperate last-minute appearance at Kevin Costner's beachside charity gala, every public move now reeks of overcompensation. But it's not just public perception they're losing. Behind the scenes, the money's drying up, the allies are backing off, and even longtime supporters are privately asking, what's next, if anything? And it gets darker. Harry's rumored new documentary about Princess Diana has sparked backlash even before it's been announced, with critics accusing him of rewriting a history he barely lived. Meanwhile, Meghan has reportedly been trying to scrub the Mountbatten-Windsor name off her children and replace it with something far more marketable, Spencer. That's right. According to Bower, Meghan wanted the Princess Diana halo so badly that she tried to rename the entire family to match it. But that's just the beginning. This isn't the story of a royal couple rising from the ashes. It's the story of two people who gambled everything: titles, family, reputation, and are now fighting tooth and nail to stay relevant in a world that's quickly moving on. And as we peel back the layers, one thing becomes clear. The comeback Meghan Markle hoped for, it may never come at all. For the past few weeks, royal watchers couldn't help but notice a sudden surge in suspiciously glowing headlines about Prince Harry. Whispers of a royal reunion, quiet meetings with King Charles, even ludicrous claims that the firm was ready to welcome him back, all flooding the media at once. But according to Tom Bower, this wasn't a coincidence. It was orchestrated. A full-blown Sussex PR offensive, designed to make headlines, not headlines of truth. But behind the glossy spin lies a brutal reality. The door to the monarchy isn't just closed, it's bolted shut. As Bower bluntly puts it, Harry has zero chance of returning to royal duties. Not just because the palace has moved on, but because Prince William would never allow it. The trust is gone, the bridge is ashes. And the moment Harry set foot back in America after his last UK appearance, he confirmed the worst fear of every royal insider. He didn't lie low. He didn't spend time quietly rebuilding dignity. Instead, he took Meghan and the kids on a very public family day to Disney World, complete with staged smiles, paparazzi-approved wardrobe choices, and all the hallmarks of a celebrity photo op, not a grieving royal son returning home. And what was he promoting at Disney? Not charity, not healing, not remembrance, a Disney Plus special. Let that sink in. Just days after supposedly meeting with King Charles in a moment of royal reflection, Harry turned around and plugged a commercial product, one that looked suspiciously like the beginning of an influencer arc, complete with family branding, feel-good optics, and the whiff of a paycheck. This wasn't a reunion, it was a rebrand. Bower didn't mince words. He described Harry as a man who wants his cake and to eat it too. He wants royal reverence and commercial relevance, tradition and television. But it doesn't work like that. And as Bower made clear, no matter how many strategic headlines Team Sussex pushes, the palace sees right through it. But the real twist? Meghan never intended to come back to Britain at all. Even as Harry floats rumors of reconciliation, Meghan stays planted in California, quietly making power moves and controlling the narrative from behind the scenes. It's always been about image, control, optics, and the Disney stunt was just the latest in a string of desperate plays to stay in the public eye. But that wasn't the whole story. Because what Tom Bower revealed next exposed a much darker truth. The Sussexes aren't just spinning PR. They're spiraling behind the scenes. There was a time when Harry and Meghan were untouchable. Global interviews, Netflix mega deals, Spotify exclusives, best-selling books, magazine covers. The Sussex brand was a money-printing machine. They weren't just royals. They were royalty reimagined, the couple who broke away, spoke their truth, and cashed in while doing it. But that illusion has shattered. And now, the power couple once courted by Hollywood's elite is quietly becoming a liability. Tom Bower says the descent has been shockingly fast. even for someone who predicted it. Meghan, once hailed as a feminist icon and racial trailblazer, is now facing a credibility crisis. Her Netflix series, With Love Meghan, landed with a thud. Her Spotify deal, canceled. Her podcast, gone. And there's no second act in sight. No book, no documentary, no buzz, just staged photo ops, a few filtered Instagram cameos, and whispers of yet another lifestyle brand in development. But the money? It's not coming in. Bauer didn't hesitate. She has no real income anymore. She's finished. Let that sink in. One of the most recognizable women in the world has no reliable revenue stream, no contracts, no clout, no clear path forward. And behind the smiles, Meghan knows it. That's why she turned up at Kevin Costner's California charity event this year, an event she deliberately skipped last year. According to Bauer, that decision alone speaks volumes. In 2024, Meghan skipped it because she was gearing up to promote her Netflix series and didn't want to look cheap or give anything away for free. This year, she showed up dressed to impress, dripping in borrowed sparkle, smiling like it was the Oscars, and offering her presence as the product. Because when the brand is collapsing, visibility becomes currency. Harry isn't faring much better. His position at BetterUp, once a cornerstone of his post-royal identity, has been reduced to occasional mentions in PR blurbs. His beloved African charity work, the one thing that gave him genuine credibility, has faded into the background. Even Invictus, his last remaining crown jewel, is under quiet strain as key leadership quietly resigns. As Bauer put it, Invictus is his only lifeline, and there'll be problems with that too. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Harry and Meghan are no longer an asset to the organizations they touch. They're a risk. Their presence draws attention, yes, but not the kind that builds credibility. It invites scrutiny, backlash, and tabloid chaos. What used to be gold-plated is now radioactive. But even as the deals collapse and the press turns, the couple refuses to let go of their public persona. They still dress like royalty, pose like royalty, speak in curated diplomatic word salads like they're still representing the crown. But they're not royals anymore. They're brand ambassadors for a fading illusion, an image of power that's slowly unraveling. And what Bauer revealed next peeled back that illusion even further. Because Meghan didn't just want out of the royal family, she wanted to rewrite the family name itself. Of all the bombshells Tom Bauer dropped, this one silenced even the most jaded royal watchers. According to Bauer, in a stunning behind-the-scenes move, Prince Harry privately approached Earl Charles Spencer, Princess Diana's brother, with an eyebrow-raising request. Harry wanted permission to legally change his family's surname to Spencer. Let that sink in. Not Mountbatten Windsor, not Sussex, not even Markle Spencer, just Spencer. It wasn't just a name change. It was a calculated pivot, a way to abandon the Windsor legacy while clinging to Diana's golden glow. And Bauer says it wasn't even Harry's idea. Meghan allegedly couldn't stand the name Mountbatten Windsor. To her, it didn't fit the brand. It didn't sparkle. It didn't sell. In her mind, the Sussex children deserved a name with a real power, one that connected them to royalty people actually admired. Not Charles, not Camilla, not the crown, but Diana. And what better way to make that fantasy real than by becoming the Spencers? According to Bauer, Meghan felt the Mountbatten Windsor name was clunky, irrelevant, and worst of all, not profitable. She once told a friend that she and Harry never had a proper surname. And when asked her last name during her lifestyle show days, she didn't say Markle. She said Sussex, as if royalty could be trademarked. But this request crossed a line because Earl Spencer saw straight through it. He didn't hesitate. He said no, firmly, flatly, and permanently. Why? According to Bauer, Charles Spencer may have seen the writing on the wall. He didn't want the Spencer legacy tangled in what many insiders believe is an inevitable divorce. He didn't want to lend Diana's name to a media circus. And he didn't want to give Meghan the keys to a brand she never earned. It was more than a refusal. It was a message. Because Diana's name has always been Meghan's obsession, from jewelry choices to fashion nods to echoing interviews, Meghan has built an entire image around the idea that she is Diana 2.0. She wears Diana's Cartier watch, borrows Diana's mannerisms, and surrounds herself with stylists who channel Diana's aesthetic. And Harry? He fuels it. He sees the echoes too. During their 2018 Australia tour, he compared Meghan's popularity to his mother's. He called the public reception electric, historic, just like Diana. But to Bauer, that wasn't admiration. It was delusion. Because as Bauer makes chillingly clear, Diana was beloved because of her work, not her wardrobe. She spent days in hospitals, hugged AIDS patients, and walked minefields in war zones. She earned her place in history through sweat, sacrifice, and time. Meghan thought she could inherit it overnight, but the Spencers weren't having it. And that refusal didn't just block a name, it blocked a narrative. Because without Diana's last name, Meghan is just Meghan. And when your entire image is built on association, Being denied that link cuts deeper than any tabloid headline ever could. But the attempt to rewrite the legacy didn't stop there. Because Meghan wasn't just borrowing Diana's name, she was trying to steal her spotlight. For Meghan Markle, it was never enough to be a duchess. She wanted to be the duchess, the one who evoked gasps, headlines, and adoration, the way only one royal woman ever had before, Princess Diana. But Tom Bower argues Meghan didn't just admire Diana, she tried to be her. From the moment she entered royal life, Meghan began crafting an identity that mirrored Diana's legacy, visually, emotionally, even symbolically. Whether it was echoing her outfits, referencing her humanitarian instincts, or strategically wearing Diana's jewelry in public, Meghan was piecing together a ghost of the past and presenting it as the future. Bower calls it a fantasy she built in her own head, and Harry, he fed it. During their 2018 royal tour in Australia, a pivotal moment in their story, Harry was convinced he was watching history repeat itself. The crowds were massive. The press was euphoric. The Sussexes were hailed as a modern royal power couple. In Harry's eyes, Meghan had become Diana, but Bower gives a very different account. One thing the palace never wanted aired. Behind the scenes, Meghan allegedly behaved appallingly during that tour, clashing with staff, complaining about schedules, and disregarding protocol. The adoration of the public only seemed to inflate her ego, not humble it. She wasn't inspired by Diana's example. She was intoxicated by it, and that's the problem. Because Diana didn't become the people's princess by flashing a borrowed Cartier watch or name-dropping trauma in an interview. She spent decades building empathy with the public. She worked in hospices, embraced the marginalized, and gave her time to causes when there were no cameras rolling. Meghan, according to Bower, skipped the journey and expected the crown. And Harry, still grieving a mother he barely knew, enabled the myth. He spoke of Meghan as if Diana had been reincarnated, as if marrying Meghan was a second chance to protect the woman he had lost. But in doing so, Bower argues, Harry misunderstood his mother completely. Diana was manipulative, strategic, ruthless with the media in her own right, but she was also authentic in her compassion and grounded in her public service. Meghan, Bower says, lacks that grounding entirely. She doesn't want to serve the public. She wants to be seen by the public. And nowhere is this clearer than in the constant, almost obsessive references to Diana's jewelry. Every public appearance comes with a press release noting which pieces of Diana's collection Meghan is wearing. Whether it's Nigeria, Colombia, or the Costner event in California, Meghan never misses a chance to draw a line back to Diana. Even when she's continents away from royal duties, she wears the symbols of a legacy she never lived. To the casual observer, it looks sentimental. To critics like Bower, it looks like brand building. But nothing sums up this obsession more than the rumored documentary Harry is now quietly developing about his mother. Bower finds it deeply unsettling. Why? Because Harry barely knew Diana. He was a child. He's since constructed a version of her filled with martyrdom and magic, distorted by grief, shaped by PR, and weaponized against the institution she once challenged. And if this documentary happens, it won't be a tribute. It'll be a rewrite. A dangerously revisionist tale built not to honor Diana, but to justify Harry and Meghan's every move since. But here's the twist. The public isn't buying it. Polls in countries once deeply sympathetic to the couple, like Australia, show their popularity plummeting. Diana's halo doesn't fit Meghan the way she hoped it would. And the longer she clings to the fantasy, the more obvious the gap becomes. Because Diana didn't have to tell us who she was. She showed us. And no amount of Cartier watches or borrowed names will ever bridge that chasm. But what happened next exposed just how far the Sussexes were willing to go to protect the illusion, even if it meant rewriting the past. If there was a single moment Meghan Markle believed she'd arrived, truly stepped into the royal spotlight, it was the 2018 royal tour of Australia. Crowds screamed, cameras flashed, headlines gushed, and for a brief moment it looked like Harry and Meghan were unstoppable. But what the public saw was a polished surface. What insiders saw, according to Tom Bower, was something much more chaotic and far more revealing. To Harry, the tour was proof that Meghan had inherited his mother's magic. The cheering crowds reminded him of Diana's glory days, and he leaned into the comparison hard. But Meghan took it further. She didn't just bask in the applause, she weaponized it. That tour, according to Bower, is what sparked the couple's belief that they no longer needed the royal family. They were bigger, better, global. They didn't need the firm, they were the firm. But here's what the palace never said publicly. Behind the scenes, Meghan allegedly behaved appallingly. Staff reported being mistreated. Schedules were thrown into chaos. Demands piled up. The sense of entitlement didn't just grow, it exploded. Bower reveals that this tour was a turning point for Meghan. She believed the crowds came for her, not because she represented the monarchy, but because she was Meghan Markle. She misread the reception as personal validation, not realizing the truth. The people cheered because she stood beside the Queen's grandson, wearing the crown's approval. They weren't cheering for a celebrity. They were cheering for a duchess. And once that misunderstanding took root, everything changed. Soon after the tour, the Sussexes began making moves. Private meetings, secret planning, leaks to the media. By the time it exploded, the groundwork had already been laid. And it started with that Australia tour myth. Fast forward to 2025, and the myth has collapsed. Polling shows Harry and Meghan's popularity in Australia has cratered. Once welcomed with open arms, they're now among the least liked royals in the region. And the irony? They haven't returned since that fateful tour. Not once. Why? Because they're no longer welcome. According to Bauer, the Australian government would need to formally invite them. And there's no chance that would happen without approval from Buckingham Palace. And the palace? They're making sure no invitation ever leaves the building. The Nigerian visit was already too much. The last thing the firm wants is Meghan and Harry waltzing into a Commonwealth country, pretending to be working royals while promoting Netflix specials, and wearing Diana's jewelry like it's a red carpet accessory. And perhaps more importantly, Meghan and Harry don't travel unless it's free. Private jets, luxury security, exclusive access. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to stage a Sussex tour. And with no official backing, whose footing is that bill? Certainly not the couple themselves. Not anymore. Worse still, Meghan's supposed global brand has no real product. There's nothing left to sell. No new series, no thriving podcast, no charitable empire. Just curated photos, strategic leaks, and a dwindling fan base clinging to past glories. Bauer frames it perfectly. She's fired her best shots, and they were duds. As for Harry, he's back to basics. Charity appearances, children's hospitals, smiles for the camera. And while some goodwill lingers, even that is wearing thin. But the real danger? The couple's desperation is no longer subtle. When they show up at events now, the question isn't what cause are they supporting? How desperate do they look today? And with every forced smile and glittery photo op, the illusion of global relevance slips further from their grasp. But that was just the external fallout. Because what Bauer uncovered next shows how even within the media industry that once embraced them, Meghan and Harry are becoming pariahs, and the bridges they burned, they're not rebuilding. They're collapsing behind them. If there's one thing Meghan Markle understood early on, it was this: control the narrative, or become the narrative. For a while, it worked. Carefully curated interviews, glossy magazine covers, a Vogue guest editorship, Oprah, Spotify, Netflix. Everything was filtered, staged, and designed to support one singular storyline: Meghan and Harry as victims of a cruel institution, now reborn as global changemakers. But as Tom Bauer reveals, the media strategy that once elevated the Sussexes is now turning on them. It started quietly, a snub here, a dropped cover there. But now, even former allies are backing away. The media isn't just uninterested, they're uncomfortable. Because when working with Meghan Markle, there's an unspoken rule. She controls everything. From headlines to pull quotes, lighting to layout, nothing escapes her scrutiny. And for journalists who once celebrated her rise, that's become exhausting. Take British Vogue. In 2019, Meghan was hailed for editing the historic September issue. It was a record-breaking collaboration, until she tried to do it again. According to Bauer, when Meghan returned years later to pitch herself for another cover, Vogue editor Edward Enninful had had enough. Not only did he refuse the request, but when asked about Meghan in 2025, he gave a masterclass in subtle shade, "I feel like I have done it, and I wouldn't necessarily repeat myself." Translation? Once was more than enough. But it wasn't just Enninful. Tom Bauer cites Sam Kashner, the journalist behind Meghan's first major Vanity Fair profile. Kashner originally gushed over Meghan in print, but later admitted he felt played and manipulated. His quotes in revenge were damning. And then suddenly, Kashner tried to walk them back. Why? Because Meghan's legal team came down like a sledgehammer. As Bauer puts it, the Sussex war machine is terrifying. They use lawyers, NDAs, and back-channel pressure to silence even former collaborators. And yet, the damage was done. Editors talk, publicists talk, Hollywood listens. And what they've heard over and over is the same story. Work with Meghan at your own risk. She'll demand final edits. She'll change her mind at the last second. She'll freeze out anyone who dares challenge her image. And once she's done with you, you're out. Discarded like yesterday's PR strategy. Even People magazine, once her most loyal outlet, is being mocked for acting as a Sussex press release factory. Readers now scroll past glowing headlines with eye rolls, knowing exactly where the quote came from, and why it sounds more like a sales pitch than journalism. And it's not just print media. Meghan's own production teams have felt it too. Bauer notes that the original team working on the Harry and Meghan Netflix doc was quietly replaced midway through production. Why? Because Meghan spiraled when things didn't go her way. Spotify insiders described her as unreachable one minute and micromanaging the next. One team member even said, "She doesn't just want control, she demands perfection, even if the product suffers. It's a pattern." One by one, media allies are choosing silence over spin, because the reward of proximity no longer outweighs the cost of control. And for two people who depend on public image for survival, losing media loyalty is a fatal blow. But it gets worse because Meghan didn't just alienate journalists and producers. She weaponized her own family's story and tried to erase the rest. And what Tom Bower reveals next is one of the most damning chapters of all. If there's one thread running through every chapter of Meghan Markle's rise and collapse, it's this: rewriting reality and monetizing the version that sells. Tom Bower doesn't just hint at this pattern, he lays it bare. From childhood stories to royal milestones, Meghan has consistently curated her past, reshaped her identity, and packaged it for public consumption. But behind every glowing anecdote lies a trail of contradictions, denials, and, at times, flat-out fabrications. Take the now infamous Ivory Clear So Bad story. According to Meghan, at just 11 years old, she wrote a powerful letter to Procter & Gamble, calling out the sexist language in a dish soap commercial. The company, moved by her courage, allegedly changed the ad. It's become her feminist origin story, repeated in interviews, podcasts, even on stage. But Bower dug deeper. He spoke to Meghan's father, who claims the letter was never sent. Vanity Fair followed up. Procter & Gamble said they had no record of any letter from her. No reply, no campaign, no paper trail. Just a story. That worked. And that's how Meghan operates. Whether it's the childhood fast food narrative, Sizzler salads instead of $20 club sandwiches with her father, or claiming she was a working royal who received no guidance, the pattern is always the same. Erase the parts that don't serve the brand. Embellish the parts that do. But the most shocking example of this rewrite wasn't about her. It was about Lilibet. Bower reveals that Meghan's team registered the domain lilibet.com before informing Queen Elizabeth about the name. The decision to name their daughter after the Queen's childhood nickname was spun as a touching tribute. But the behind-the-scenes timeline tells a different story. First came the branding, then came the family call. And when the palace pushed back, stating the Queen was not consulted, the Sussex legal team threatened to sue the BBC for reporting it. The palace refused to back down, and quietly, Harry withdrew, because the truth wasn't on his side. This wasn't about honoring the Queen. It was about securing a domain name, a trademark, a future product line, a monetized child. But the real endgame wasn't the name, it was the title. Meghan and Harry lobbied quietly and relentlessly to ensure their children would be recognized as prince and princess. And after months of standoff, the palace caved at their daughter's private baptism in California, far from the crown that title represents. It wasn't a moment of unity. It was a strategic win. Meghan had secured royal titles without royal responsibility, and it's a move many insiders believe was never about tradition, but about branding, legacy, and long-term leverage. Because, make no mistake, everything is commercial. From the coat of arms slapped onto Spotify graphics to Duchess of Sussex being used in Disney specials, Meghan has transformed royal identity into market currency, a costume, a caption, a logo. Even Diana's legacy was fair game. Bower says Meghan viewed the name Spencer as more than a tribute. It was a potential rebrand, one that could carry her through any divorce, any scandal, any exit. But when Earl Spencer refused to hand it over, the plan crumbled. And without a name to steal, a past to rewrite, or a family to monetize, Meghan's next act became uncertain. Because the only thing harder than climbing to the top with smoke and mirrors is staying there once the mirrors crack. But just when it seemed the rewriting had hit its limit, Tom Bower hinted at one final twist, one that could upend everything. Because there may be someone else, someone hidden, someone whose existence changes the entire narrative. By now, even Meghan Markle's most loyal defenders are starting to ask the question no one wanted to say out loud. Where does she go from here? Because behind the filtered Instagram photos and curated media drops, a darker reality is surfacing. One of increasing isolation, burned bridges, and spirals behind closed doors. Tom Bower paints a chilling picture. He reveals that Meghan, once surrounded by stylists, strategists, PR consultants, and Hollywood insiders, is now running out of people willing to play the game. And Harry? He's already paid the price. Bower recounts a pivotal moment early in their relationship. What should have been a fun, traditional weekend at Sandringham with Harry's lifelong friends. Instead, it became a social landmine. Meghan reportedly clashed with everyone. She reprimanded jokes, challenged banter, and made it clear that if conversations didn't align with her values, they were unacceptable. The fallout was immediate. Those friends, some of whom had known Harry since childhood, were cut out completely. None of them was invited to the wedding reception. That weekend, Bower says, wasn't just awkward, it was decisive. It marked the beginning of Meghan's total control over Harry's social circle. And now, Harry is more alone than ever. Most of his UK friends won't speak to him. His ties to military communities are strained. Even royal charities have quietly distanced themselves, fearing the tabloid storm that follows his every appearance. His support system has shrunk to a tight, heavily managed inner circle. And yet, in public, the couple insists everything is fine. But it's not fine behind the scenes. Bauer reveals that Meghan has a pattern when things don't go her way. She spirals, sends 5 a.m. emails, demands total control, fires teams, replaces producers, retreats into silence, then re-emerges, fully polished, as if nothing happened. That's not just PR. That's crisis mode. It happened with the Netflix docuseries. The first production team didn't last. Meghan reportedly micromanaged, rewrote, and clashed. A new team was brought in. Same outcome: control, censorship, and tension. Spotify insiders say the same. She disappeared during key moments, then demanded edits at the 11th hour. When the partnership failed, Meghan's team blamed everyone else, but never her. And as Bauer notes, she's now learned a crucial lesson. Vulnerability doesn't work anymore. After the Oprah interview, when fact-checkers dismantled nearly every major claim, Meghan realized that public sympathy had an expiration date. The tears in the Tom Bradby interview, the miscarriage piece in the New York Times, the "nobody asked if I was okay" moment, they no longer land the way they once did. And so, she stopped doing interviews altogether. No more unscripted sit-downs. No more risky Q&As. Just controlled spaces. Select media allies. Hand-picked narratives. But even those are starting to unravel, because you can only curate reality for so long before the curtain falls. Meghan isn't being invited to A-list events anymore. No Met Gala, no Obama parties, no Clooney sightings. Even Jill Biden, once a political ally, turned down their request to fly back to the US aboard Air Force One after the Queen's funeral. It was a snub with a message. You're no longer useful. So what's left? A floundering brand, an increasingly isolated husband, projects that don't stick, titles that can't be monetized like they once were, and a public that's no longer buying what they're selling. Which leaves Meghan with one final option: reinvention. But how? Another podcast? A lifestyle brand? A ghost-written book? A political move? Or the nuclear option? The one insiders whisper about constantly, but no one will say aloud. Walk away from the marriage. Bauer hints at it. The public suspects it. And Meghan's past behavior suggests it's a scenario she's already prepared for. She's secured the titles, the links to Diana, the children, the narrative. And if Harry's value continues to decline, financially, socially, and emotionally, what reason would she have to stay? Because for someone who's built an empire on optics, loyalty was never the foundation. Image was. And now, with the brand cracking, allies fading, and control slipping, all eyes are on the one move she hasn't made yet, the move that would change everything. Once upon a time, Meghan Markle married a prince, walked into a palace, and stood at the center of the world's attention. It was the modern royal fairy tale, diverse, glamorous, rebellious, and it looked for a fleeting moment like the story would end in triumph. But as Tom Bauer has made painfully clear, the real story was never a fairy tale. It was a brand strategy. And now the brand is collapsing. We've watched the PR campaigns, the Netflix confessions, the Spotify flops, the staged photo ops, the disappearing deals, the desperate reinventions. We've heard the rags to riches rewrites, the war against the palace, the endless comparisons to Princess Diana. But beneath the glitter and grievance, one truth keeps surfacing. Meghan and Harry built their empire on borrowed light, and now the lights are going out. What was once groundbreaking is now grating. What once drew sympathy now draws skepticism. And what once promised a bold new chapter in royal history has become a cautionary tale about overreach, control, and what happens when you burn every bridge you cross. The palace won't have them back. The press won't play along. The public's patience has worn thin. And the elite circles that once welcomed them with open arms are quietly closing their doors. Because the Sussex story is no longer about truth or trauma. It's about tactics. It's about brand survival in a world that's stopped caring. Meghan's obsession with legacy, control, and perfection has boxed her in. Every move now feels calculated, defensive, and, worst of all, predictable. And Harry, once the heartbroken prince trying to protect his wife, now looks more like a man lost in a machine he helped build and can no longer escape. So what happens next? A comeback? A confession? A collapse? Maybe all three. Maybe none. But one thing is certain. The illusion is gone. The curtain has lifted. The masks have slipped. And we're no longer watching a couple trying to heal. We're watching a brand unravel in real time. And for all the spin, all the strategy, all the perfectly timed media drops, there's one truth the Sussex machine can't control anymore. The world has moved on.